London, February 1842. The Frost Fair. Aaron Marsh, Duke of Westmere, lived by three immutable principles. Never make decisions based on emotion, never allow strangers past the gates of Westmere House, and under absolutely no circumstances involve oneself in the affairs of distressed women. On the afternoon of February 14th, 1842, he shattered all three in the span of 3 heartbeats. The Thames Frost Fair stretched across the frozen river like an elaborate stage set for collective madness. Striped canvas tents billowed in the bitter wind, vendors shouted over the crack of ice and the roar of braziers, and the mingled scents of roasted chestnuts, fried fish, and coal smoke hung thick in the air. The previous night's snowfall had given the scene a deceptive beauty, though it couldn't disguise the treacherous footing or the crush of humanity that Aaron found unbearable. He had come under protest. His man of affairs, the perpetually meddling Thompson, had insisted it was unseemly for a duke to be seen nowhere but his study and the Exchange. "Your father would have attended," Thompson had argued, which was both accurate and deliberately manipulative. "1 hour, Your Grace. Purchase something for the Widows' Fund. Demonstrate that the Duke of Westmere hasn't entirely forgotten he belongs to the living." Aaron had managed 32 minutes when his carefully ordered world came undone. He stood before a cartographer's stall, examining a rather fine map of the Orient, when he registered a disturbance in the crowd behind him, a ripple of concerned murmurs, the shuffle of bodies making way. He turned, more from irritation than concern, and saw her. A young woman in a pale silk dress the color of winter sky, utterly inappropriate for the weather, moved through the crowd like a ghost. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, her lips were tinged with blue, and her remarkable eyes, he would remember those eyes in the split second before they closed, were unfocused and desperate. She took one more step toward him, her gloved hand reaching out as if to steady herself on his shoulder. Then she fell. Not a delicate swoon, but a complete collapse, her body pitching forward with the deadweight finality of unconsciousness. Instinct obliterated a decade of careful self-preservation. Aaron lunged forward, arms extending, and caught her against his chest in what was undoubtedly the most graceless rescue ever performed by English nobility. Her head lolled back against his shoulder, snowflakes catching in her lashes, her breath coming in shallow gasps that he felt against his throat. The map fell forgotten into the slush. The crowd pressed closer, all gawking faces and useless exclamations, and Aaron Marsh, the Duke of Westmere, a man who had sworn never to let another soul past his carefully constructed walls, found himself cradling a dying stranger in his arms and making a decision that would destroy everything he'd spent 10 years building. He would take her home. The crowd parted with surprising deference when Aaron bucked for his carriage. Perhaps it was his title, or perhaps it was the look on his face, the expression Thompson once described as the one that makes debtors weep. Either way, they scattered, leaving him alone in the falling snow with an unconscious woman in his arms and a growing sense that he had just made a catastrophic error in judgment. She weighed almost nothing. That was his first coherent thought as he adjusted his grip, one arm beneath her knees, the other supporting her shoulders. The silk of her dress was thin enough to be criminal in this weather, and he could feel the chill of her skin, even through his leather gloves. Her head rested against his chest, dark curls spilling over his arm, and with each step through the snow, he became uncomfortably aware of the rise and fall of her breathing. This is a logistical problem, he told himself firmly, nothing more. He was simply transporting an unconscious person to safety. The fact that her hand had curled instinctively against his waistcoat, or that the scent of lavender clung to her hair despite the river stench of the fair, was irrelevant. His carriage arrived, and Aaron climbed inside with more difficulty than he cared to admit, refusing the footman's assistance. Once settled on the bench, he should have placed her on the opposite seat, the proper thing, the sensible thing. Instead, he found himself keeping her cradled against him, telling himself it was warmer this way, that moving her might cause further harm. Through the frosted window, the frost fair receded into a blur of color and noise. Inside the carriage, there was only silence, save for the muffled sound of hooves on snow and the shallow rhythm of her breathing. Aaron Marsh stared out at the falling snow and realized with dawning horror that he was in significantly more danger than the woman in his arms.
Dr. Edmund Pierce had been the Marsh family physician for 30 years, which meant he was one of the few people alive who could look at Aaron with something approaching paternal disapproval. He did so now, emerging from the guest bedroom with his medical bag and a frown that suggested imminent lecturing. "Well?" Aaron demanded, hating the edge in his own voice. "She'll live, no thanks to whoever sent her out in winter silk." Pierce removed his spectacles, cleaning them with deliberate slowness that Aaron recognized as a tell. "But, Your Grace, this isn't mere exposure. The body has a way of surrendering when the mind can no longer bear its burden. I've seen it in soldiers returned from war, in women who've lost children. Grief-induced exhaustion, we call it, though the term hardly does justice to the violence of it. You're saying she wanted to die?" "I'm saying something in her wanted to stop fighting." Pierce tucked his spectacles away. "She needs rest, warmth, and time. Keep the fire stoked, the curtains drawn. I'll return tomorrow." He paused at the door. "Aaron, do you even know her name?" "No." The physician's expression said everything his words didn't. Then he was gone, leaving Aaron alone in the hallway outside a room that now contained a mystery he hadn't asked for. He should have left her to Mrs. Daventry, his housekeeper, should have respected her privacy, her dignity, whatever propriety dictated in situations where one rescued unconscious strangers. Instead, Aaron found himself pushing open the door. She lay motionless in the four-poster bed, dwarfed by damask curtains and quilts that seemed to swallow her whole. Mrs. Daventry had changed her into a nightgown borrowed from some long-departed guest, and her ruined dress hung over a chair by the fire, dripping melted snow onto the carpet. Aaron approached the dress like it might detonate. The silk was finer than he'd realized, French-made if he wasn't mistaken, with detail work that suggested wealth. Not a servant, then. Not some unfortunate seamstress fallen on hard times. This woman belonged somewhere, to someone, and that fact should have been comforting. He lifted the bodice, ostensibly to hang it properly. That's when he felt it, something stiff beneath the fabric, sewn into the corset with stitches so small they were nearly invisible. Aaron hesitated for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he retrieved his pocket-knife. The object was a letter, folded small and sealed with dark red wax that bore no crest he recognized. The paper was expensive, the weight of it substantial. He turned it over in his hands, studying the seal, knowing that breaking it would cross a line from which there was no return. From the bed came a small sound, not quite a word, more like a plea made in sleep. Aaron looked at the mysterious woman, then at the letter that might explain who she was, why she'd nearly died in his arms, and why every instinct he possessed was screaming that he should have left her in the snow. He broke the seal. The first line made his blood freeze. "Lord Barlow expects his daughter's return by month's end."
She woke on the 3rd day, and Aaron knew it immediately, despite being 2 floors below in his study. Something in the quality of the house's silence shifted, like the moment before a storm breaks. He took the stairs with measured deliberation, refusing to acknowledge the acceleration of his pulse. When he entered, she was sitting upright against the pillows, her dark hair a wild tangle around her shoulders, and her eyes, those remarkable eyes he'd catalogued in the split second before she fell, were wide with what he could only describe as terror. "Easy," he said, stopping several feet from the bed. "You're safe. This is Westmere House. I know who you are." Her voice was hoarse from disuse, but surprisingly steady. "The Duke of Westmere, the Ice Duke, they call you." She drew the coverlet higher, a gesture that was both protective and oddly dignified. "Why am I here?" "You collapsed at the Frost Fair. I brought you to my physician." Aaron kept his tone neutral, clinical. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Something flickered across her face, perhaps surprise, calculation. 3 days, she repeated softly. Then her gaze sharpened, sweeping the room with an intensity that suggested she was cataloguing exits. "My things, where are— Your dress is being cleaned. You had no reticule, no identification." He paused, watching her carefully. "No letter, if that's what concerns you." The lie came easily, and her reaction confirmed his suspicion. She went very still, the kind of stillness prey animals adopt when predators draw near. "I should go," she said, already pushing back the coverlets, despite the trembling in her hands. "I have imposed enough on your hospitality, Your Grace. If you could just arrange for a carriage." "To where?" Aaron moved closer, unable to help himself. "You can barely stand. You have no belongings, no stated destination, and according to Dr. Pierce, you were half dead from something considerably worse than cold." He crossed his arms. "I'll ask once, and I suggest you answer honestly. What's your name?" "Sophia." She met his gaze with a defiance that shouldn't have been possible from someone in a borrowed nightgown. "Just Sophia." "Just Sophia." He let skepticism color his voice. "No family name? No relations who might be concerned about your 3-day absence?" "None that matter." Her chin lifted slightly, and Aaron was struck by the graceful line of her throat, the stubborn set of her jaw. "And before you ask, no, I wasn't attempting to end my life at your precious Frost Fair. I was simply unlucky with my timing." "Your timing," Aaron repeated flatly, "was spectacularly poor." "Yes, well," something almost like humor touched her lips, "I've been told I have a gift for inconvenience. Though I must say, Your Grace, for someone with a reputation for coldness, you're remarkably invested in the welfare of a stranger." The observation landed like a blade between ribs. Aaron found himself staring at this woman, this Barlow daughter, this enemy sleeping in his house, and feeling the treacherous ice crack wider beneath his feet. "You're not leaving," he heard himself say, "not until you're well enough to answer questions, and not until I decide you're telling me the truth." Sophia's eyes held his, dark and depthless. "Then I suspect, Your Grace, we'll be here quite some time." Aaron found her in his library at midnight, which was both a violation of household protocol and oddly inevitable. She stood before the window in a borrowed dressing gown, silhouetted against the snow-bright darkness, and he knew from the set of her shoulders that she'd heard him enter. "I couldn't sleep," she said without turning. "Mrs. Daventry said you wouldn't mind if I borrowed a book." "Mrs. Daventry," Aaron replied, closing the door, "has become remarkably liberal with permissions regarding my private spaces." He moved to the sideboard, pouring 2 glasses of brandy with hands that were steadier than they should have been. "Though I suspect insomnia is the least of your troubles." She turned then, accepting the glass he offered. "And what would you know of my troubles, Your Grace?" "Only what you've chosen not to tell me." He gestured to the leather chairs by the fire, "which is everything of consequence." They sat in a silence that felt less hostile than their previous encounters, the crackle of flames filling the space between words. Aaron found his gaze drifting to the maps mounted on the far wall, his collection, his obsession, the one indulgence he allowed himself beyond necessity. "Ceylon, 1723, Sophia said suddenly, following his line of sight. "The Portuguese rendering before the Dutch annexation. Your cartographer mistook Trincomalee for a natural harbor. It's man-made, fortified over centuries." Aaron felt something shift in his chest. "You know Ceylon." "I know maps," Sophia said, rising, drawn to the wall like a moth to flame, her fingers hovering just above the parchment.
My father had a collection, not as extensive as yours, but substantial. He used to say that maps were lies we told ourselves about mastery, that every border was just a line drawn by men who convinced others to believe in it. Your father sounds like a philosopher. Her expression shuttered. He was many things. Aaron stood, joining her at the wall, close enough to catch the scent of lavender again, close enough to see the fine tremor in her hand as she pulled it back from the map. "Sophia," he said quietly, and the use of her name felt dangerously intimate. "Why did you really collapse at the Frost Fair?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I'd been running for 3 days with nowhere left to run. Because London was supposed to be far enough, and it wasn't. Because—" Her voice cracked, and she moved away, toward the pianoforte tucked in the corner that hadn't been played since his mother died. "May I?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. Sophia sat, her fingers finding the keys with the certainty of long practice. What emerged wasn't the delicate parlor music expected of ladies, but something darker, a nocturne that spoke of winter and longing and losses that had no names. The notes filled the library like smoke, curling into corners Aaron had thought permanently sealed. He watched her play, this mystery woman with his enemy's name and a musician's soul, and felt the last of his carefully constructed walls begin their fatal fall. When she finished, the silence was more profound than before. "That was Chopin," Aaron said, his voice rough. "The Nocturne in C-sharp minor. Most people don't know it." Sophia's smile was sad and knowing. "Most people don't listen to what music is actually saying, Your Grace. They only hear what they want to hear." And Aaron, standing in his library at midnight, with a woman who was supposed to be his enemy, realized he'd stopped hearing his own warnings entirely.
The messenger arrived at dawn, which meant the news was catastrophic. Aaron received him in his study, Thompson hovering near the doorway with the expression of a man watching his employer walk toward a cliff. "Lord Barlow has issued inquiries," the messenger said, "through his contacts at the exchange, through the magistrates, every social connection he possesses. He's searching for something stolen from his estate a week ago." Aaron's hand stilled on the letter opener. What manner of thing? "An asset of significant personal value. He won't say more, but he's offering £500 for information." £500. Men had been killed for less. He dismissed the messenger, then sat in silence as Thompson poured coffee neither would drink. "You're thinking of the girl," Thompson said. "A week ago, Sophia appeared wearing a dress worth more than most families earn in a year, with no belongings beyond the name she chose to give me." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Now the man who destroyed my father is searching for stolen property." Thompson set down the coffee pot. "What did the letter say?" Aaron had told no one about the letter, but Thompson had been with the Marsh family long enough to read silences. "That Barlow expects his daughter's return by month's end." "His daughter?" Thompson's face went grey. "You've brought a Barlow into Westmere House." "I've brought Sophia." "You've brought the enemy's daughter into your home, your confidence, your—" Thompson caught himself. "What were you planning to do with this information?" Aaron moved to the window overlooking the gardens where Sophia walked each afternoon. He could see her now, a distant figure in borrowed blue, feeding the winter birds. She coaxed them to her hand with patience that seemed at odds with everything else about her. "Initially, I thought I might use her, leverage against Barlow, justice for what he did to my father." He watched a robin land on her palm. "But now you've grown attached to your leverage." The word struck home. Aaron turned from the window. "I need to know the truth, what she's running from, why Barlow wants her back." He met Thompson's gaze. "And I need to know if anything she's shown me has been real." "Then ask her, Your Grace, before Barlow's inquiries lead him here."
But Aaron was remembering the tremor in Sophia's hands on the piano keys, the crack in her voice when she spoke of running, the terror in her eyes when she awoke. A stolen asset, Barlow had called her, as if his daughter were property to be recovered, rather than a person who'd nearly died trying to escape him. The ice around Aaron's heart didn't crack this time, it shattered. The Duchess of Harrington's winter ball was the kind of spectacle that made Aaron's teeth ache. Crystal chandeliers dripping with enough candles to illuminate a small city. 3 orchestras rotating throughout the evening, and enough titled gossips to fuel London's scandal sheets for months. He'd avoided such events for years, but circumstances had forced his hand. Sophia stood beside him at the top of the marble staircase, transformed. Mrs. Daventry had procured a gown of midnight blue silk that made her skin luminous, and her dark hair was swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. She looked every inch the lady, which was precisely the problem. People would ask questions, and Aaron had spent 3 days crafting lies that tasted like ash in his mouth. Miss Sophia Marsh, the majordomo announced, distant cousin to His Grace the Duke of Westmere, recently arrived from the Continent. The ballroom fell silent in that particular way that meant everyone was listening while pretending not to. Aaron felt Sophia's hand tighten on his arm, her fingers trembling through the fabric of his coat. "Breathe," he murmured. "You've faced worse than a room full of aristocrats." "Have I?" Her voice was barely audible. "I'm not entirely certain anymore." They descended into a sea of scrutiny. Lady Pembroke materialized immediately, her smile sharp as a blade. "My dear Duke, what a delightful surprise! And who is this enchanting creature? I wasn't aware the Marsh family had continental relations." "My mother's side," Aaron lied smoothly. "Sophia has been studying music in Vienna. The political situation made it prudent for her to return." More lies layered like armor. Sophia played her part beautifully, answering questions with just enough detail to satisfy without inviting deeper inquiry. But Aaron could feel the tension radiating from her, could see the way her gaze kept darting to the exits as if calculating escape routes. When the orchestra struck up a waltz, he made a decision that defied every principle of self-preservation he possessed. "Dance with me." Sophia's eyes widened. "Your Grace, I don't think—" "You know the Ice Duke never dances," he said quietly, "which means if I dance with you now, they'll believe you're family. They'll believe you matter." He extended his hand. "Trust me." The irony of those words wasn't lost on either of them. She placed her hand in his, and Aaron led her to the center of the floor. The crowd parted, whispers rising like steam. He could feel hundreds of eyes tracking their movement, but the moment his hand settled at Sophia's waist, the rest of the ballroom ceased to exist. She moved like water, following his lead with a grace that suggested expensive tutors and years of practice. Another detail that didn't fit the story she'd told him, another lie by omission. But as they turned beneath the chandeliers, her face tilted up to his, Aaron found he didn't care. "This was a mistake," Sophia whispered. "They're all staring." "Let them stare." His hand tightened at her waist, drawing her closer than propriety allowed. "Let them see the Ice Duke thaw. Let them wonder what manner of woman could manage it." "And what manner am I, Your Grace?" Aaron looked into those dark eyes that had haunted him since the Frost Fair and spoke a truth that terrified him. "The dangerous kind." The waltz ended, the ballroom erupted in applause, and Aaron Marsh, Duke of Westmere, realized he'd just announced to all of London that his heart was no longer his own.
The storm broke 3 days after the ball, and so did Aaron. He'd watched Sophia become part of Westmere House, charming his staff, playing his mother's piano, sketching winter birds in his gardens. He'd almost convinced himself the letter meant nothing. Then Lord Pembroke's investigator delivered his report. Sophia Barlow, only daughter of Lord Edmund Barlow, age 23, educated at continental schools, accomplished pianist,
expected to marry Lord Ashford's eldest son in a union cementing the Barlow family's political dominance, expected to marry someone else. Every conversation replayed through a poisonous lens, her knowledge of maps, her grace, her expensive dress, not a runaway, but an operative. She'd collapsed at his feet, how convenient, let the Ice Duke rescue her, grow attached, then extract whatever information her father needed to destroy the Marsh legacy. Thunder rattled the windows. Aaron moved through the house with lethal purpose. He knew where she'd be, the library, where she always went during storms. She stood at the window watching lightning fracture the sky. She turned, and her smile died at his expression. "Aaron, what's wrong?" "Don't." The word cut like a blade. "Don't use my Christian name. Don't pretend you don't know what's wrong." He threw the report onto the table. "Sophia Barlow, daughter of my greatest enemy. Was the fainting at the Frost Fair your idea or his?" All color drained from her face. "You knew." "I've known since the first day. The letter in your corset was indiscreet." He advanced, fury and betrayal warring in his chest. "What I didn't know was how good an actress you'd be. The terror, the vulnerability, the midnight confessions. Was any of it real?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Thunder punctuated his shout. "Did you draw straws to see which Barlow would seduce the Ice Duke? Was it amusing watching me thaw? Did you report to your father each night?" "Stop it!" Her voice cracked. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're a spy sent to infiltrate my home, my confidence, my—" He caught himself. "Your heart," she finished softly. "Yes, I'm a Barlow. Yes, my father sent me to London, but not to spy on you, to save you." "Save me?" He laughed hollowly. "From what?" "From him." Lightning illuminated her desperate face. "My father is planning something terrible. I stole the evidence. I was bringing it to you when I collapsed, half dead from running. Everything I told you was true, except my name." She stepped toward him. "I fell in love with you, and that was never part of anyone's plan." Aaron stared at her, wanting desperately to believe, knowing he couldn't afford to. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, his heart made its fatal choice. Sophia moved to the desk with trembling hands, pulling documents from beneath her bodice where she'd kept them hidden for days. "My father has been embezzling from the Crown for years, falsifying trade records, bribing officials, framing rivals for his crimes." She spread the papers across the mahogany surface. "Your father discovered it. That's why Barlow destroyed him. Not business rivalry, but self-preservation." Aaron stared at the documents, his father's familiar handwriting appearing in the margins of several pages. Notes, calculations, evidence gathered before his death. "How did you—" "I found them in his study 6 months ago. I've been copying documents since, building the case your father started." Her voice broke. "The marriage to Ashford's son, it's payment. My father sold me to secure political protection when this comes to light. I was supposed to be safely married and silenced before anyone discovered what he'd done." Thunder crashed, closer now. Aaron reached for the papers, but Sophia grabbed his wrist. "There's more. He has a warrant for my arrest, forged documents claiming I stole from him. If I'm caught, I'll hang for theft, while he destroys the evidence and walks free." Her eyes locked with his. "I didn't collapse at the Frost Fair because I was running from you, Aaron. I collapsed because I'd spent 3 days evading his men, trying to reach the one person in London who might care enough about justice to risk protecting me." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Sophia!" Glass shattered in the front hall. Shouting erupted below, followed by Thompson's voice raised in protest. Aaron's blood turned to ice. "They're here," Sophia whispered. "He's come for me." Aaron moved without thinking, grabbing the documents and shoving them into his coat. "The servants' passage. It leads to the stables. Take my fastest horse and ride for Pembroke's estate. He'll protect you While you what? Fight them alone?" Sophia seized his lapels. "There are at least 6 men, Aaron. I counted them from the window."
Then you have a head start. He pulled her toward the hidden panel. Go, now! I won't leave you to face this because of you. He kissed her, hard and desperate, tasting salt from her tears or perhaps his own. When he pulled back, his hands framed her face. I spent 10 years becoming the Ice Duke because I was afraid to need anyone, afraid to be destroyed by caring. But you're worth being destroyed for, Sophia Barlow. You're worth everything. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, men's voices rough with authority, demanding entry. They're here, Aaron said. Promise me you'll run. Promise me you'll survive. He had no promises left to give. Instead, he shoved her through the panel and turned to face the door as it burst open. Lord Barlow stood in the threshold, 6 men behind him, his face twisted with rage. Where is she, Westmere? Aaron smiled, cold and sharp as winter. Gone, and you'll have to kill me to find out where. Barlow's hand moved to his pistol. That can be arranged. The storm screamed. Aaron's hand closed around the letter opener on his desk, not for his pride this time, not for revenge, or his father's legacy, or the Westmere name. For her. Only for her. Then let's begin.
February 1843, the Thames Frost Fair. Aaron Marsh had forgotten how loud the fair could be. The vendors hawking roasted chestnuts, the laughter of children skating across the ice, the cheerful chaos of humanity celebrating winter's grip on London. A year ago, he'd found these sounds unbearable. Now, with Sophia's hand tucked into the crook of his arm, they sounded like music. "You're smiling," she observed, her breath misting in the cold air. "The Duke of Westmere smiling at a public fair. The scandal sheets will have a field day." "Let them." He pulled her closer. "Propriety be damned. I have a reputation for melting to uphold." She laughed, the sound bright against the winter afternoon. She wore burgundy today, a deliberate choice, Aaron suspected, a callback to the pale blue silk she'd collapsed in a year ago. Her dark hair was pinned beneath a fur-trimmed bonnet, her cheeks flushed with cold and happiness. The Duchess of Westmere, his wife, his salvation, the woman who'd saved him by letting him save her. The aftermath of that storm-torn night had been chaos. Thompson had arrived with the magistrates minutes after Aaron faced down Barlow's men, the documents already delivered to the authorities by Sophia's cunning planning. Barlow was arrested within the week, his corruption exposed, his forged warrant revealed as the desperate act of a cornered man. The trial had been swift and brutal, the sentence severe. Aaron had testified, speaking his father's vindication into the record, but it was Sophia's courage, her year of secret document theft, her willingness to risk everything that had truly brought Barlow down. They'd married 3 months later in a quiet ceremony that still managed to fill Westminster Abbey. London society had been scandalized at first, the Ice Duke wedding his enemy's daughter, but Sophia had won them over the way she'd won him, with grace, wit, and an unflinching honesty that made pretense impossible in her presence. "Do you remember where it happened?" Sophia asked, softly. Aaron guided her through the crowd to a familiar spot near the cartographer's stall. The same vendor stood there, though the maps had changed. Aaron could pinpoint the exact place where he'd turned and seen her falling, the moment his carefully ordered world had shattered. "Here," he said, "you collapsed approximately here." Sophia turned to him, her dark eyes luminous. "And you caught me." "I did. My hero." She said it without irony, though Aaron knew he was far from heroic. He'd been cruel during the confrontation, suspicious when he should have trusted, slow to believe what his heart had known from the beginning. "I nearly lost you, my pride, my fear. But you didn't," Sophia's gloved hand touched his face. "You chose me. You chose us. That's what matters." Snow began to fall, soft and steady, catching in her hair like stars. Aaron pulled her close, no longer caring who watched or what they thought.
A year ago, touch had terrified him. Now it was the only truth he needed. "The snow doesn't feel as cold this year," Sophia murmured against his chest. "No," Aaron agreed, pressing his lips to her temple. "It feels like the beginning." Around them, the frost fair swirled with life and noise and possibility, but in this moment there was only warmth, only Sophia, only the quiet certainty that some falls, the dangerous, terrifying, impossible ones, were worth the catching. Always. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of Aaron and Sophia's unforgettable love story. A tale of an ice duke who learned that to trust is not to bleed, but to heal. From the bottom of our hearts, we hope their journey from the frozen Thames to the warmth of forgiveness brought hope, emotion, and perhaps even a few tears to your day. If you enjoyed watching the Duke of Westmere catch a falling stranger and discover his own heart, please like, comment, and share. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support us. Your support truly means the world and helps us stay motivated to continue telling stories full of love, redemption, dangerous secrets, and breathtaking twists. At the end of this video, you'll see another suggested story from our channel. Click it and be surprised by more emotional tales just like this one. Thank you for being here.